Okay, go ahead. How can I help you, Dominic?
So I have a few questions.
Okay.
First I wanted to dive into kind of like the afterlife or kind of non-material world according
Mhm.
to Islam. So I'm just wondering, because I know I am Christian in the Bible, how it says we were made in God's image, and I kind of how does that correlate to Islam and our existence?
Okay, I'll ask you, what do you mean we're made in God's image? Because that statement can be true in a way, false in a different way. So I need to
Yeah,
know what you mean by that statement, because different Christians have different beliefs about that. Someone would say, made is God in God's image. Jesus is God, is a human being. Goes, okay, we're human. It just depends on what you mean by we're made in God's image. You're Christian, so I want to know your understanding.
got you. I would say that outside of like our materialistic world, God has like a sort of consciousness and we are able to express those attributes of God. Not our like physical bodies isn't his image, but how we express ourselves through like the attributes of either love, mercy, justice, righteousness, all these other types of things. So that's what I mean by made in his
So,
image.
so if you say what you mean is that the human beings possess attributes, God possesses attributes. There is a link in the definition of what that attribute is. Love is this. We have love. The Creator has love. We have knowledge. The Creator has knowledge. But the way the Creator has them and the way we have them is different. So God has absolute knowledge, full knowledge, eternal knowledge, etc. We have limited knowledge. Starts at some point. It's not eternal. If that's what you mean, Muslims believe the same thing. You don't have any issues saying that we have attribute of love. The Creator has the attribute of love. God's love is maximally perfect. Our love is deficient, etc. We don't have any issues with saying that. If this is the meaning of the statement here, then the meaning that you're saying we don't have an issue. But we wouldn't use
Hmm.
the statement in a way that can confuse people. Because as you said, it can confuse someone to say that we're made. Okay, what do you mean image? Do you mean that God looks exactly like we look? Then we'd say, oh, we reject that meaning. We don't accept that meaning.
Okay, perfect.
But
And then
now you
going
said
in,
you're a Christian, but in your belief, but I'll let you finish actually what you want to say first before I come
oh,
in
I,
with my
oh
commentary.
no,
Yes.
go ahead and say what you're gonna say. I was just gonna dive into like then kind of like build off of that. But if you have something you wanted to say,
Yeah, no, I usually let the people say whatever they want because I don't want them to feel like I'm putting them on the spot or something. But all I wanted to say
okay,
is, in your belief, anyways, you believe Jesus was God and Jesus was a human. So that statement will be literal in that sense. If you are a Christian who believes Jesus is God, I don't know what kind of a Christian you are. Every
hmm,
Christian has a different belief. I speak to them all the time. So depending on what Christian you are, if you believe that Jesus was God, that Jesus was human, then Jesus is literally in that. You are in that image exactly, that image of God, same image, literally now, physically talking, not just attributes or any of that.
hmm. So I would say for that, I would definitely say the like physicality of Jesus is the human aspect of it, and then the divinity aspect would be the spirit, and that's the part of God within the human body, if that makes sense.
Uh, no, can you say that again?
So you're asking
Hmm.
like if I believe Jesus is God, correct?
No, I'm saying if you
Or
believe Jesus is God, you said you already
yes,
you already believe that. I'm
yes,
saying
correct.
since you believe that you are in the physical image of God because your God had a physical human image, Jesus. So it's not just about the
Mm,
attributes. Do you get what I'm trying to say? I'm saying if you take that statement in Christianity, it's not just the attributes, it's also the reality because God was human in your belief.
correct. I would disagree with that part though, because I say the human being part is the part of man that's separate from God. That's the created aspect of it. And then the spirit, the consciousness is the part of God.
So Jesus
So
had,
we're
uh,
we're made so Jesus embodies the man in terms of our physicality. So that's just our body, which is creation. But
so
he differentiates in like the spirit.
so Jesus had a created part and an uncreated part.
Correct.
Okay, let's leave it here then. Okay, you believe a part of your God is created and a part of your God is not created.
The physical part has been created
Yes, I'm
in the
just confirming.
materialistic world. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm just confirming. So a part of your God is created, a part of your God is not created. We'll say that's a problem. Our God is completely uncreated. There's nothing about Allah that is created. And if there is anything about Allah that is created, we say that's problematic because God, by definition, is an uncreated being. So if He is created, then we'll ask the question, what created it? What created the part of your God?
Well, I would just say the laws of the universe, like the physical aspect of it, would create
The
the
laws
human
of the
body.
universe. The laws of the
The
universe
human body
created.
aspect, yes, yeah,
So the laws of the universe created the part that is created of your God.
of the human aspect.
Okay. I think you need to look that through because it's very problematic. I think even Christians will have an issue with that. Okay, look, we are saying, look, our belief is very simple, and that's what we're calling people to. The creator does not mix with the creation. He's not a part created. There's nothing about the creator created. Creator creates everything and everyone. Whatever is created or has anything created about it cannot be God and is not God. And that's why when you look at Jesus, the attributes that he displayed was not attributes of God, it was attributes of man. He showed that he was a human being. He wasn't God. He was never a part of a Trinity. He never said he was a part of a Trinity. There's no Trinity in the Bible anyways. But Jesus said explicitly and expressed that, for instance, he doesn't have full knowledge. Expressed that someone other than himself is the true God. Prayed and fell on his face to someone else. Said he has a God. All of these things Jesus did. And if he did, then he is not God and he cannot be God.
I understand what you're saying. I do. Can I ask another question that kind
No,
of
no, of
goes off
course.
of
Yeah,
that?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, yeah, of course.
I did watch another one of your videos, and so you were talking about how the human soul is it post-eternal?
Yeah,
I
you can
believe
use
you
that. You can use
reference.
that term. Yes, if it's either eternally in paradise or in hellfire. Yes, it's created, but then it remains either in hellfire or remains in heaven. Yes,
I would
for
ask,
eternity.
so if I do believe God is obviously omnipresent, omniscient.
We
So,
don't believe God is omnipresent. If you mean
oh
omnipresent,
no,
he
you
is in. Yeah, if you mean omnipresent, he's on all of the creation in everything.
hmm
So under my feet right now, God, the God that you, I don't want to say this disrespectfully, but the God that you believe in is under my feet right now. I'm stepping on him. We don't believe that.
hmm I
We
would
believe the creator is transcendent. Allah is above everything.
I would
And highness is an attribute of majesty. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, it's all good. I would just ask, just because he is all knowing, there would have to be some sort of like unifying field in the sort of sense that's transferring like information for him to be all knowing. Does that like make sense?
No. God is
Like,
eternal. So nothing transforms
yeah,
anything into God. God was always all knowing, was always possessing his knowledge. There is not a point. So the attributes of knowledge in God is eternal, meaning it's always existing. From the beginning, from if you want to use the term beginning, even when it doesn't apply to eternality, but from the beginning and the start, using human language with its limitations, God was always knowledgeable. There's not a point in which God did not know something.
I would ask, so if he already knows about basically every single soul that's going to be created, wouldn't it in effect give it its own existence within God already? If it's already known about?
But that's not existence. Like, you know, for example, that I'm here talking to you. Do I exist now inside your reality or your mind, or where do I exist now in a complete different universe or something? No, I exist where I am. You have the knowledge itself as an abstract concept. It's not
Yeah.
like some you exist within. I exist within you now just because you know that I'm talking to you, or that you know that I'm here, or you know that I have a YouTube channel or something. Can have knowledge of something. Processing information does not mean that that physical entity now exists within you because you process that information.
I guess, how do you think that him being eternal and then all knowing, hmm, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this just in terms of, so how would you say, I guess, according to Islam, how the world was created exactly?
How do I say, according to Islam, how the world was created?
Like, does it go into that? Like,
Yeah, the Quran
like in
talks
terms
about
of
that. Yeah,
the materialistic world being created?
yeah. Allah
Like,
said, "Be," and it is. That's how it is. Allah says, God says, "Be," and it is. And it's very similar to the beginning of Genesis. Let there be
yeah,
light. All of the stuff. Let there be. God created. We believe Allah created it on a period of 6 days. Same thing like you have in. It's very similar in the Old Testament. Now, this period, Allah created the universe in it. Created the what we call the heaven, which is above us, and He made 7 layers of it. Then He created paradise. He created hellfire. He created planet Earth. He created angels. All of these things are things that God created. If you want to talk specifically about things in this world, Allah created, as we said, this sky above us, and He made 7 layers of it, and He created the earth and the universe that we live in, essentially. So God, by his power, that is what it means to be all-powerful, is that you can say be and it is. That is what it means to be all-knowledgeable, that you can create these complex systems just by willing their existence. This is what God is.
Do you think, not currently, we don't have like the technology to do it, but do you think in the future we'll be able to like scientifically observe and explain, like as we get further along into kind of like the creation of matter? Like this is a personal, just like a personal question.
No. We cannot create
Not like
actual.
create it, but like observe
Mm,
the process of how it came into being.
no, but we already have an answer to that. Is because when you talk about there's two things. First, science is a tool that studies the material, the
Yeah.
physical things that you can put under microscopes. It doesn't study the metaphysical. Metaphysical is a completely different route. If the universe was created by metaphysical, then we cannot observe it being created because we're using science, because science is a tool that studies the physical, and what created it was metaphysical. Secondly, we already see that problem when you look at scientists and they're coming to the Big Bang, and they say at the point of Big Bang, all our laws that we apply today does not apply. There's infinite equations. We cannot calculate or understand what was going on at that time. It's beyond the human, tools, to put it that way. That's why they cannot tell you what was before the Big Bang. The question is always being asked. They cannot answer it because it wasn't something physical. It wasn't something that is operating with the laws that we operated, which is why you cannot tap into that reality. So science is not something which is, unlimited, unrestricted in its, tools and its discoveries. It's only limited to the physical, materialistic.
I completely agree with that. And then going into that, I would say, would you agree with the concept that our relationship with God is what gets us in touch with the metaphysical reality, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, physicality is wider from a Muslim point of view. There are we yes, interaction with God is something that is metaphysical. You interact with the metaphysical, essentially, if you want to use that term, metaphysical, with God. Also with angels, whether it would be with jinn, which are like, you want to call them demons, you want to use a different term. All of these things are also that. These are also things which are not physical from the world that we are in, but there's a level of interaction that takes place as well.
And then, so would heaven be within the metaphysical or within the materialistic, a different materialistic realm?
Heaven is an actual place, but it's not in
Okay.
this world. We believe it's above. It's not in this world. As I said, there's 7 layers. On top of these 7 layers, the heaven, you have heaven there. So, but it's an actual place that is created, that you will have actual gardens, you have actual rivers, you have actual rewards. So it's an actual place that people will go to. After they're
Okay.
resurrected, they will go there. Either there, or of course, or hellfire.
And then, so when the soul moves from one place to another, does it go through the medium of like a metaphysical area, or does it, I guess, so to speak, how would it go from one
Soul
realm
itself
to
is
another?
metaphysical. The soul itself
Yeah.
is not. Yeah, it's not a physical thing. So the soul, all the interactions, it's a metaphysical thing. What we call the soul. It's not a physical reality. It's not something you can touch and put under a microscope or see. Or it's not that.
Okay.
Now,
Um.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was still thinking. You. It's all good.
Yeah, no. I was gonna say. Then what is now your position now? Because I was telling you about Jesus. What do you believe about Jesus? If you said you believe he was God, I talked to you a little bit about why he cannot be God. My question is, why do you believe he is God or divine to begin with, when he didn't say it?
So I have a term like outside of the physical world, which is the metaphysical. I believe there's like an all-encompassing God, like God's consciousness, all-knowing, all the attributes that he possesses, and then that consciousness went into a physical body, but upon doing so, obviously it has its limitations within the
Well,
physical realm.
yeah, so that's not, yeah. It's a very new belief. As I said, that's how I was telling you at the beginning. Every Christian believes something different. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. Right, I'll tell you this. What you just described is what a human being is. God created a soul, which is metaphysical, and he put it in a human being, and the human being is limited. Or what you just told me, Jesus is a human. That's essentially what you just said.
I see. I'm saying that it just came from the
Mhm.
consciousness instead of it being created. It came from the eternal consciousness
What do you mean it came from? You mean the eternal consciousness, whatever that you're using that term for,
or
created
soul. You
that
could say
soul?
soul,
Okay, so the creator created a soul, and that soul went into a
but
body of a human being.
I wouldn't say it created the soul. I would say I don't know what term you would want to use, but I would say the essence of God. Then whatever you want to.
The essence of God, what happened to it?
So I'm saying the metaphysical aspect of God
Uh-huh.
came into a physical body.
Okay, so this is the problem now. This is the issue. First, I'll say to you, why do you believe that? That's number one. Number two, if this is what you believe, then there was not three, there was just one. Because that God, which you call the ultimate consciousness, became Jesus, according to what you're saying. Still one God. So there's only one God, Jesus. So that God, which became Jesus, who is he talking to and asking help from and praying to?
Oh, God the Father, yes,
But you just said that God entered into Jesus and became Jesus.
yes.
Then how is he still talking to what you call God? If
No,
God,
yeah,
do
I
you
definitely,
see why it doesn't make sense? Yeah.
no, I understand where you're coming from. The only way I could reconcile that would be upon, because the metaphysical and the physical world definitely has a barrier between it, and upon that are these limitations. And so basically, the essence of God coming into the physical realm has this sort of like distinction, if if that makes sense, because like our souls, we're only bound by our own physical bodies. So like what we identify with, like many of us, we only identify with our physical bodies instead of our souls, which like can express the attributes of God. And so the only way I would say, I'm sorry,
That doesn't
I'm getting,
doesn't yeah, it's fine,
yeah,
but it doesn't answer what I was saying though, right? I'm still making the point. If you do believe God, whatever the consciousness called is, went into a human
mm-hmm,
being, and that
yeah,
human being is now God. And if that human being is now, you can use different terminology, words that, with all due respect, are just words, but they don't answer
yeah,
or respond to what we're saying. If that God you call the consciousness or the essence of God entered into a human being and became a human being, then that is the only thing that exists now. You have God walking around. Now, that God that was walking around is not going to say, I have a God, and start praying to it and asking help, please save me. It's not going to happen because that is God now. Unless there is a different God now. Then you have two gods. One God consciousness that became a human being, and another God consciousness that is higher and superior, that the small God consciousness that became God is seeking help from. And that's a big problem. So
well,
far, yeah.
I guess why would you say that would be a problem? Because I'm
Because
saying
because
coming
that's
into the
not
human form,
because
it
that's
would have
against
its
because that's
limitations.
polytheism. Because that's polytheism, and it's against everything that the Bible teaches. It's against the first command. There's only one God. Yeah, you're
But
literally
I'm
just. It
saying
would make no sense. Yeah.
it would be within the same essence.
No, it cannot be within the same essence because you said that essence became the human being. If you say a part of the essence became the human being, then that's another heresy. You have two gods now, one part in earth and one part in heaven.
Hmm.
Look, look, so far, everything you've been saying, with all due respect, is not biblical. It's you're trying to come up with an
Oh
explanation.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'll
100%,
tell you
I
that's a
understand that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and I'll tell you that's a problem. You're trying to come up with things as you go. Essentially, you're making it up as you go, and that's an issue because now you're talking about God, and God is beyond your perception and understanding. You cannot make up what God is, and the more you do that, the more you get yourself in trouble. That's what we've been seeing because your explanations are not going to be rational because you're talking about God without knowledge. In order for you to talk about God, you need to talk about God based on what God told you about Himself. God said He's only one. Jesus never said He was God. Jesus didn't say He has all knowledge, all power. And He demonstrated that He doesn't, which means He cannot be God. So for you to believe He's God to begin with is a problem because He never told you He's God. So you should rethink why do you believe that to begin with. Why don't you believe the rational thing that Jesus said? He was created by God, just like Moses was, just like Abraham was, like all the prophets of God were. He was walking, doing miracles like they were doing miracles with the permission of God, like Moses split the sea, Jesus healed the sick of light, same thing. And then he was a human being in that sense. He worshipped God. That's why he worshipped God. He didn't have all knowledge. He told people worship the Creator. He told them about God because that's what every messenger does. And that is what is perfectly in line with the life of Jesus. Now, to try to introduce full ultimate consciousness, becoming essence of God, all of this stuff which has nothing to do with the Bible, is just Greek philosophy, essentially, what you're trying to introduce now. So you're making up things about God that God did not say about himself. So that would be my recommendation, is to actually see things for what they are and to look into Islam, because Prophet Muhammad, he was just like Jesus, peace be upon him. He was just like Moses, peace be upon all of them. They're all prophets and messengers of God. They came with one line. They came with the same message. There's one creator worthy of worship. These are the commands that is beneficial for your time. Do these things that God commanded you to do. Pray, give charity, be good to your parents, be good to your neighbor, all of this stuff. And here is the message, the revelation that I'm bringing with me. Follow it. And that is what is going to get you into eternal life or paradise or whatever term you want to use. And this is what I call you, is to worship that God alone, the God of Jesus, Moses, Noah, and Abraham, and Muhammad, peace be upon all of them. And to follow the message that came to you, the last message that was sent, which is the Quran, and the last messenger that was sent, which is Prophet Muhammad, that also believes in Jesus, and is a requirement for all of us to believe in Jesus and Moses and Noah and Abraham and all of the prophets, a messenger of God, peace be upon them all. But that message is preserved. It's not corrupted like previous messages. It's not changed by human beings. You don't have Greek philosophy jumping inside and trying to tell you about all of this. No. It's a pure teaching, a monotheistic religion of the Creator. And that's what I'll call you to, So, you're welcome to. You're obviously welcome to become Muslim anytime if you would, you feel that's something that makes sense to you. There is one Creator that is worthy of worship, not a human being, not a man, not a woman, not an idol. And he created these prophets and messengers, and he came to deliver that message to mankind, that this was the role. If you believe that, then you're there.
I have one more question, if that's okay.
Oh, of course, go ahead.
So for the eternal life aspect of it, going either heaven or hell based off, can you just give a quick summary based off what that's based upon, and then I can ask the question just based off that? Or like what determines
basically how the judgment,
determines.
what determines, okay,
Yeah,
what determines someone. If someone dies upon Islam or doesn't die upon Islam is what determines the eternality in hellfire or heaven. So if someone dies with a pure monotheistic belief that he believes in Allah alone, the Creator, Allah is just the Creator, and that Creator, which is not a man, not a woman, does not resemble the creation, not a human being, none of that. Someone who believes in Allah alone, he's the only one worthy of worship. He believes that. And he believes that Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of God. Jesus was, Abraham was, Moses was, and these messages came from them. That God created angels, he created heaven and hellfire, and there is a day of judgment and things that are distant. There's previous revelations that were sent. Someone believes in these things, dies upon that belief, he will enter paradise. Now, he could live an evil life and do evil stuff. If he doesn't repent, he will still be punished for a period of time. But in the end, he goes to paradise. So his eternality, if we talk about eternality, if you die upon that belief, you're eternally in paradise. If you do not die on that belief, any other belief, you worship other than Allah, you worship anything else with Allah, or you don't worship Allah at all, you don't believe He is the one worthy of worship, you don't believe in His existence, then you are doomed to go to eternal hellfire. That is what separates a person from going to paradise or going to hellfire.
And then what would you say the purpose or the meaning of like our existence in this world would be?
Two things. First, this life is a test, whether we will worship the Creator or not. So this is it. Worshiping the Creator, and this life is a test. The test is whether you will worship God or not, or you will follow your own desires and Satan, etc. That's why we're here. That's why we exist in this life. Whether we will give God His due worship, even though we can't do that, but we'll do our best to worship God and be grateful, or we'll follow our desires and Satan and other things.
So I would, of course, worshiping God would be the one that once you like actually live that in your life would be the only thing that ends up bearing fruit, and any other thing you make out of a God would lead you towards death or like not experiencing life to the fullest. And so what I would ask is, since these heavens are in a so materialistic in a different realm, I guess, but is time, I guess, the same? Like, does it work the same as it does here?
Actually. We don't know that actually. Al-Tabari, which is one of the classical exegetes, he talked about this, for instance. He said, how does the concept of time, because even for us, time is relative.
Yeah.
Like if you exist right now on in the moon, time works for you differently than it works when you're on planet Earth, for instance. If you're measuring it with the sun and sun's movement, it's a relative thing. So how does it work in paradise? We do not know exactly how it works. You have to be there to understand. But it's eternal life, anyways. So it's kind of would be irrelevant, right? How time is functioning in that way, because it is an eternal existence to the end. It's not something that stops. But how exactly time works there is not something that we know.
Okay. I would say just for like this, I definitely agree with this, like being a test and everything. And so time is kind of that filter which weeds out all of gives us opportunities to grow with our like relationship with
Yes.
God and everything. So the only thing I would ask is kind of how like the eternal hellfire is more so our willingness to like not let go of the false gods we create instead of, because
That's a
for
part
me,
of it. But
yeah,
that's a part of it. That's polytheism that I was telling you about.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a part. It's many bad things. This is the one of them, to create other false gods or to reject the creator. This is the biggest sin in Islam. Either reject the creator or associate partners with him, make something equal to him other than the creator. This is the unforgivable sin. That's why if you die upon that, then you don't go to paradise.
hmm that's pretty much it. The only questions that come to my mind at the moment.
Okay. So as I said, I extend you the invitation anyways to accept Islam. You know,
Mm.
if you want to do that, you're welcome to do that. Now, if you want to come another time and ask questions, you're also welcome to do that. It's completely up
I'll
to you.
come another time. I'm
No
definitely gonna
problem.
get the Quran. I definitely want to read through it first.
No issues. No issues. And you're welcome to come back anytime and ask questions. Okay.
All
Nice
right,
talking
thank
to
you.
you.
You
Bye
too.
bye.